Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 5th of April, comes to you from London. And the dollar's still holding on here. Trade war tensions just easing a little bit, which is helping markets this morning. So the dollar just holding some strength here on the short-term chart. Of course, medium and long-term still bearish. And then if we look at the euro dollar, that's just struggling and just making new short-term lows. So short-term bearish, and we do have downside potential of about 2% there. So US dollars just looking a little bit better than it has done of late. Against the yen, we see the dollar really strengthening, so it really shows up against the Japanese yen, and against sterling. We see sterling falling a bit against that stronger dollar as well. Just has really been faltering the last several weeks at the 140 level. Uh, Looking at sterling against the euro, sterling's had the slight upper hand there. Against the Swiss franc, also looking a bit more bullish. Against the Australian dollar, really been sitting at this 183 level for quite some time. Bitcoin, yesterday we tweeted that Bitcoin had downside potential of some 23%. These were the targets that we're seeing on the long-term charts now, and we're back to bearish territory. So Bitcoin looking a bit more bearish today. And taking a look at the US markets, the Dow Jones opened down 500 points yesterday, but actually recovered to close up 200 points. So that 700-point range in a day is quite something. And we're seeing here the S&P recovered quite strongly. But of course, the key thing is we have broken this medium-term cloud. So even though we had a strong recovery yesterday, this is looking more and more like a breakdown in the price. The key thing is, will we see lower lows? So if we take out this February low, then that's a really big cause for concern. And the signs are that we could well do that. We haven't activated the long-term downside and targets yet on the S&P chart. But if we look at the Nasdaq chart, we have actually activated downside targets. So tech is really what's driving this sell-off. And even though we saw a sharp recovery yesterday at the end of trading in the US, we have broken key trends, and that's quite important. Looking at the Dow, as I said, we opened 500 points lower and then closed 230 points higher. That's one whopping great 700-point range. And interestingly, we see that recovery through yesterday. Just started at the bottom here and then just marched up the hill. It hasn't managed to get back into short-term bullish though, so we are bearish in the short term and bearish in the medium term. And again, we do have downside targets on the Dow that have been activated. Looking at the Russell 2000 index, the broader-based US market, we saw a strong recovery here yesterday as well at 1.3%. But again, we're bearish below the cloud. Downside target's not yet activated here either, but is looking worrying. Looking at the E-mini, so the S&P, we see that is up 0.2% this morning, and the Nasdaq E-mini is up 1%. So it does suggest that US markets will open higher. I mean, the fact that we did open down so much and then close quite a lot higher does suggest that people are still very willing to buy the dips and buy this market. They're seeing value. So it's interesting, and we are seeing on the futures here that people are buying at a higher level than they were previously. And we did make new highs on the Nasdaq. The key thing is, can we do it again? The FTSE 100 index up quite strongly this morning on that better performance in the US. The FTSE 250 up almost 1% as well. Just struggling to get through on the this 60-minute cloud here. The FTSE 100 though is through, so short-term turns bullish. It's a while since we've seen that for the FTSE. And if we look at the German DAX, also just turning bullish. So for the first time in a week or two, we are seeing the markets turning short-term bullish. And if we look at the CAC, that's very clearly bullish as well. Japan was up over 1% overnight into bullish territory on the short-term chart. The Hang Seng, strangely, was not a strong performer, and it is down, so it just didn't manage to pull that through. And that's taking the Hang Seng bearish for the first time, so quite interesting difference there. Chinese market was up and quite strongly, just turning almost not really getting to bullish yet, so we're still bearish below the cloud. If you look at the Sensex, up over 1.33%, and it has got back above the cloud. So a lot of these markets, short term, turning bullish, which is a good thing, but a lot of the damage has been done on the medium term chart, so it's still disconcerting. The Aussie market not yet actually managing to get through on the short term chart either. Crude oil was up yesterday, but is still bearish on the short-term chart. We do have a little bit of recovery. Have found support here on crude, but for the moment we're sitting at that 68 level. Just struggled to hold the $70 mark, so that's quite key. And if we look at WTI, a similar picture as you would expect. US Natgas is just turning bearish again, back in the 260s, so struggling to hold any gains here, really in the doldrums. Gold had a very strong performance over the last couple of days with all the turmoil over trade wars, but that's pulling away now. We did actually give a new upside target to 1383. It'll be interesting to see whether that gets unwound or whether we get another thrust target here. So watch this picture quite closely on the gold chart. The long-term picture is still pretty bullish, of course. And looking at silver, that's turned down as well. US Treasury yields. It's been a real feature as well, sitting at 2.82%, just strengthened quite considerably yesterday. So we are just seeing an improvement there, and we're back to short-term bullish. Got an upside target of 290, so we're almost there, actually, 3% away. Taking a look at Apple, Apple was up nearly 2%, so looking strong there. Really, we're seeing a lot of the tech recovering. Price not quite getting back through the short-term cloud. If we take a look at Amazon, also been a big seller in recent sessions. Was up, but again, not bullish above the cloud at all. So short-term, a lot of these Nasdaq tech majors are still looking bearish in the short term, even though we're seeing markets recovering. Google, much the same picture, not yet bullish above the cloud. Facebook was below 152 at one stage yesterday, and I did actually tweet that we had activated this downside target on the long-term charts, so that was quite worrying. But interestingly, we haven't we recovered in the session with the overall market strength, but we still closed down for Facebook, so looking pretty bearish. And then last of all, Microsoft marching up the hill with its long-term trend, but and getting back above the cloud on the short term, one of the few charts to do that, but still has work to do. So overall, markets recovering short term, but medium term, a lot of these trends have been broken. So I'm really quite concerned that this recovery is likely to be short-lived. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.